Thank you.
One, madam. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum and good morning, everyone present here. Welcome to the 7th session of UMSAILS-UAP International Virtual Conference on the impact of COVID-19 pandemic in the legal field. I'm Farzana, lecturer of law, University of Asia Pacific. We have two distinguished panelists in our today's session. One of the panelists is Professor Dr. Mizanur Rahman, Director, Center for Advanced Legal Studies, University of Dhaka. Dr. Rahman is also Chairman of National Human Rights Commission, Bangladesh. Another distinguished panelist is Ms. Sayeeda Rizwana Hassan, Advocate, Supreme Court of Bangladesh. Ms. Hassan is also Chief Executive of Bangladesh Environmental Lawyers Association. Thank you, sir and madam, for being with us. We're really honored to have you in this session. In this session, we'll have 4 papers presented by the participants. First participant is Nadia Islam Lodi, who is a student of Department of Law and Justice. Jahangirnagar University will present her paper with Mehnaz Binte Amin, who is also student of Department of Law and Justice, Jahangirnagar University, on COVID-19 and climate change and new legal hegemony for an eco-friendly world. Second participant, Hansi Halangoda, student of law, General Sir John Kotwala Defense University, Sri Lanka, will present her paper on the impact of COVID-19 on the environment, a critical analysis with environmental law principles and environmental justice. Third participant, Mahmoudul Hassan Shabuj, student, Department of Law and Human Rights, University of Asia Pacific, will present his paper on COVID-19 vaccine, no business on lives. Fourth participant, Zareen Tasnim Rahman, student of Law, Department of Law, University of Dhaka, will present on human rights and policy perplex COVID-19 in context. This session will be moderated by Ms. Nadia Wahab, Assistant Professor, Department of Law and Human Rights, University of Asia Pacific. Now I would like to request Ms. Wahab to take the floor and start this session. Good luck to the participants and thank you. Ms. Wahab.
Thank you so much, Farzana, for giving me the floor. I am welcoming all the participants and our honorable panelists to our UMSAILS-UAP International Conference on the COVID-19 impact on the legal field. So our today's program is divided into 3 parts. In our first part, our presenters will present their respective papers, and in our the second stage, our honorable panelists will give their recommendations or suggestions or comments on the papers presented, and in the last stage, we will have a question answering session where all the participants can put the question directly to the participant as well as to the panelist. So in this stage, I would like to call our first presenter, Nadia Islam Lodi and Mehnaz Binte Amin. They are going to present their joint paper on COVID-19 and climate change, a new legal harmony for an eco-friendly world. So on behalf of them, I think Mehnaz Binte Amin will going to present their paper, isn't it? Or Nadia Islam Lodi?
It's me, ma'am, Nadia Islam Lodi. I'm going to present the paper.
Okay, Lodi. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. A very good morning to all the distinguished guests, panelists, and all the other participants. Today, I'm going to present our paper, COVID-19 and Climate Change, a new legal hegemony for an eco-friendly world. So this paper was initially thought of as like we wanted to show and look for a world that is more eco-friendly, more survival-friendly. So now I would like to actually go into the paper and introduce it. So from my paper, I will go through, and my co-author, Mehnaz Binte Amin, will share the slides. Thank you, Mehnaz. Okay. So, for the introduction, I must tell that COVID-19 has brought a new life to us. Before 2020, we didn't know a life that could be restricted in a living room, but now we actually live in a living room and operate our professional lives from there as well. And this has given us a new perspective altogether. So, and at the same time, we also have understood that the planet needs to be survived for our own survival. Now, for the reason that we actually wanted to relate between the COVID-19 and climate change is that both are some more major imminent issue than many of the other issues. Why COVID-19? Because it's already been 1.5 years and there is no or like very few remedy as the vaccines are already available, but yet not that much of success. And there is also a dilemma, or you may say that there is also a saying that is maybe this is not a natural thing, or maybe this is not a natural virus, rather it is more like a man-made or biological weapon. In international law, it is prohibitory, and also it is a criminalized act to develop such weapons, but there are propositions like that, and some of the conspiracy theorists have actually called this as a biological weapon, alleging that maybe China is behind this production of COVID-19 virus for the reason that they wanted to get benefited from it. Now, for myself, I must tell that I don't care if it is made out from man or a laboratory or it is a natural cause, but the reflections are actually more horrific than the world could take on. Like even so in the initial stages, it was thought that COVID-19 has become a boon for the natural healing. But if we go deeper into our paper, we will be seeing that that is not the case actually, because in one of the study reports, it has been shown that the pandemic has harmed the environment more than and resulting in a negative environmental impact. A news published in the Telegraph actually said that the Second World War set up a new global order. As UN at its head, diplomats and academics also are watching that coronavirus is also making China at the head of the global political power. And there has been no concrete evidence to substantiate that, so we must not assume or believe anything, but the presumptions and assumptions can always be made. And then again, there are some clashes due to this notion of COVID-19 being a biological weapon is that already there are clashes with China, such as the Beijing is already been clashing with India for its Himalayan border. Washington and Australia are actually fighting over the issue of coronavirus's origin. They are already going through several investigations and studies. And then there is also Canada actually going against with China for the detention of an Huawei executive. Again, there is also Boris Johnson's decision to ban the telecom from the UK's high-speed wireless network, and that is also a serious clash. And this, if we connect the dots, we can actually see that there is already clashes arising out due to this presumptive shift of global power. Now, why we are actually talking about COVID-19 along with climate change? Because if we believe the naturalist thought that COVID-19 is natural's own weapon to heal itself from the already done damages, then we must believe that climate change, the actual problem is climate change, because we have done enough damages to our environment that the climate has been changed to a level that it cannot be preserved to its previous level. And to our sorrow that scientists are all has been knocking for in our doors to the doors of the world leaders that please look out on this topic, but actually our world leaders are more busy with development and other activities that they don't think that climate change is a big issue till this day. Because many of the reports or many of the study reports we have included in our paper that they didn't make the headline in the international newspapers or international forums. Okay, so Mehnaj, go to the environment present issues of environment. The fourth slide. Okay, so there are some environmental issues in recent years, and many of them I have already added in the slide. WHO, World Health Organization, already have calculated that 4.2 to 7 million people die each year due to air pollution, and 9 out of 10 people actually breathe air that includes high amounts of contaminants. Like maybe we are actually breathing out cigarettes instead of air. And there are actually, there will be people like 1 out of 10 people will actually suffer from asthma like me, because I actually suffer from it the most, and that is why the reason I am actually advocating for this topic. So again, I have to say that this is not just air pollution. This is not just one perspective. There are other perspective as well, which is the biodiversity loss. The biodiversity of our environment has already been disrupted as a result of chronic air pollution. And one of the study actually shows that sixth mass extinction of animal on Earth has already been accelerating, and approximately 500 land animal species are on the verge of extinction and are expected to be lost over the next 2 decades. So another report of WWF has shown that from 1970 and 2016, there has been a loss of population sizes of mammals, fish, birds, reptiles, and amphibians. And this declination has been of average 68%, which is an alarming rate, of course. Then with the air pollution, we also have other issues such as the atmosphere is changing, the weathers are changing, so is the nature of our land is changing. And now there is another imminent issue, that is deforestation. Deforestation not only causes the lands to change its nature, but also the environment as a whole. It is shown in a study that forests of 20 football field sizes are cut down. And if this continues, about just 10% of the world's wood may remain by 2030. And if we continue at this rate, there will be no wood and it will be only 100 years. So we are actually going to a world that is going to be woodless, or forestless, or treeless. And we can imagine how we are going to survive in that era. And there is the biggest issue, that is the shortage of oxygen. Because deforestation does not cause only the change of nature in the land, it also causes a change of weather, because if we do not have oxygen, it doesn't matter what we breathe in, because we are eventually going to die. Now, some chain of events are given in the slide. That is, there has been some incidents that actually made out to the international newspapers, and they were actually made headlines, such as the China's forced floods indicates rising highest methane levels, Canada's last intact ice shelf being collapsing. And then there is also a report that tells us that 13% of the deaths in EU actually are the result of pollution and contamination. And there has been the record-breaking wildfires in California, which I will be explaining in the later stage of our presentation. And one of the horrifying thing is that the world's most giant iceberg, that is the 70 times the size of Manhattan, was broken from Antarctica. And if that iceberg starts to melt down, then that is another alarming issue. And then there is a survey published in the Science Nature magazine. Around 11 million tons of plastic enter the seas each year, affecting ecological habitats and species that dwell in there. So plastic is another imminent pollution that has been knocking our door internationally, globally, and nationally as well. Because in Bangladesh, that is the reason actually the most of the roads are blocked in this season. So plastic pollution maybe not recent for us, but maybe it is not recognized as much as it should have been. And the study reports also says that if we continue to pour down the plastics in the sea like this, or at this rate, then there will be 29 million metric tons going through the seas each year, and if it continues, there will be more plastic than fish by 2050 in the seas. So that we are giving you all the pictures of all the scenarios of environment pollution that is actually an effect of climate change and also causing climate change to deteriorate. And then we are going to, we have already entered into an era where we are living with COVID-19, which is also an environmental hazard. As a student of law, I must tell that this is more like an environmental hazard than any other political issue. So it is said that at the very initial events, COVID-19 was seen as a boon because there has been some magical incidents, like there were species coming freely out on the road or coming freely to the places that were not seen as a habitat for them or a free ground for them. Yeah, and some of them are that a pair of monkeys were spotted having a pool party in a posh society of Mumbai, because it doesn't actually matter. Mumbai is more of a populated state of India, so it's really a magical thing to see. And then there was astonishing footage of gigantic flock of flamingos moving to Mumbai also, flooded the social media. And there has been also news of rare dolphins and turtles returning to Cox's Bazar shores in Bangladesh as tourists were barred from the beach. And there has also been reports that the carbon dioxide emission level has also been downcasted. But these were the initial events. What happened after 1 year is much more deteriorating than we have imagined. And then there has been notion that despite the fact of 2019 was the worst year of deforestation, there has been satellite images and reports shown by INPE in April 2020 that 64% of additional farmland was cleared than that of in April 2019. And if we again to rethink about the air pollution, then we must have to see that this air pollution can actually influence this pandemic in 3 ways. That is, according to epidemiologists, by enhancing transmission, raising vulnerability, and exacerbating the severity of the virus. By studying PM 2.5 microparticles, biologists discovered that inhaling them for many years increased the chance of contracting the virus. And it has already been...
Nodi, I am interrupting you. I'm so sorry that
Yes,
you
ma'am.
have to conclude your presentation within 5 minutes. Thank you so much.
Okay, so I'd jump into the point where we actually show that we have already shown you the results of the long-term impacts of environmental changes and also the effect of COVID-19. But the problem is that we are doing very little actions, very little activisms are there in working in this particular section. I do not deny the fact that there is no body active in this field, but there are bodies who are properly active, but still the action, the result is not what we should have seen. So there is a section that state leaders are acting against the environment. How I am saying it, that there has been an incident that Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro actually signed so many developmental projects that is harmful for the Amazon that is thought of as the lungs of earth. And then there is a problem of law. As a law student, I must show you the loopholes of law. The very first loophole of international law, in particular the international environmental law, is that these laws are not binding in nature. The domestic laws are binding upon us. Moreover, these laws are actually made to benefit the developed states. There are Paris Agreement, there are Kyoto Protocol, SDG, Stockholm Declaration, Rio Declaration, but all of them has resulted in today's venture. And we also have shown in our paper the other loopholes of international law, international environmental law, and then we also have shown the problem of Paris Agreement's implementation, because in the Paris Agreement, state leaders signed for reducing their carbon emission, but they have acted in a way that has increased the carbon emission. So they have already breached their promise to the Paris Agreement and to the world. Now, we have also shown in our paper some of the possible actions that we can take. That is, we actually need an international monitoring body. In Paris Agreement also, it was mentioned that by 2024, there will be a monitoring body, but still, we don't know if that body is going to come, or at this stage, we actually need that body operating right now, not in a future timing. And then we also need some more strict actions. Like there should be domestic bodies such as our Department of Environment, our Department of Forest, but there should be a separate body in itself, so a separate new legal structure in itself, who is going to be operating as a legal implementary body. And they are going to show the biannual reports or reports that will show their activism and the developments they have made. And there should be strict implementation of polluter pays principle. We all know that there is a polluter pays principle, but how many incidences are there that we have seen that polluter pays principle has been activated? And then there should be a strict implementation of the transboundary pollution clause, because if we see that China has not been able to actually contain the virus in whatever way we call it. They hasn't been able to contain that virus in their own territory. So it is also one sort of transboundary pollution that has caused us a lot. And then there is a environmental impact assessment clauses, but in many of the big development projects, we don't actually see the reports or how that particular project is going to pose a threat, or how that damages will be resorted to its previous self. And the problem that there is no international particular forum where we can go and seek for justice. That is that we don't have an international environmental code, and whenever we go for dispute settlements, we actually go to ICJ. And ICJ is already burdened with so many political and state-based needs actions, but environment is more of like it has both civil and criminal nature. So we actually need a body that has experts and panelists of environmental law and of scientific expertise that can actually operate in that code. So these are our propositions.
Nadia,
And
I'm so
yes,
sorry.
ma'am.
Time is up. You have to conclude your proposition within.
Yes, ma'am. Yes. Yes, ma'am. We are already concluding. So finally, what we have to say is that it is high time we actually invest in the healing process of nature, actually give it the time and the nourishments it requires, rather than funding the projects that are infrastructurally or industrially developing. We rather should go for a more eco-friendly based world where the environment is nourished, the environment is valued, not that we have to use it or the resources, rather we are preserving it for its own value. Thank you everyone for hearing me for this law. I'm Nadia Islam taking my leave from this presentation, but I'm open to any queries and any questions you have, so you may go on. Thank you everyone.
Okay, thank you so much, Nadia Islam Nodi and Menas. We'll take the question later after the last stage of our today's session. So thank you so much. Now, I would like to call Hansi Halangoda from University of Sri Lanka. Her paper is The Impact of the COVID-19 on the Environment, a Critical Analysis with the Environmental Law, Principles and the Environmental Justice. Ms. Hansi Halangoda.
Very good morning to all of you. Am I audible?
Yes.
Give me a second to upload the slides. I think now you can see my slides.
Yes, we can see.
My research area is the environmental law, and the basic reason behind my selection.
Can you please turn off your video, Hansi?
I cannot open my video because host has stopped it.
Okay. Please start.
Okay. The reason behind my selection is, as we can all witness that the environment, because of this pandemic situation, our environment has an improved quality. So we all have a duty to protect that nature and maintain this improved environmental quality. These are my contents. I will going to do a brief introduction about my study, then the significance of my study, and I have drafted the questions and objectives, then the methodology which I have used, then the discussion part, that is my analysis and the recommendations based on the discussion, finally the conclusion and the references. First, in introduction, I have focused mainly, my studies mainly focus about the Sri Lankan context. So I have identified water pollution and the air pollution are the basic sources and the main sources of pollution in Sri Lanka. And I have identified the pollution in India. I have included a brief discussion about the Indian pollution because it has transboundary effect Sri Lanka as our neighboring country. During this pandemic situation, most government has imposed lockdown measures such as curfew and travel restrictions. Therefore, it has resulted a good impact in environment. For an example, as you can see, the air quality index in Colombo in April 2020, it is 52.1 in average. When we compare it with 2019 and 18 records, it is an improved quality. And some experts in Sri Lanka, such as General Manager, Marine Environment Protection Authority in Sri Lanka, and senior scientist, National Building Research Organization in Sri Lanka, have said that closure of many industries and commercial enterprises, it has minimized the wastewater and solid waste generation in environment, which is generated to the environment. So I'm going to talk about this change with the environmental law principles such as sustainable development, polluter pays principle, precautionary principle, public trust doctrine, and public interest litigation. So when it comes to my research significance, I can say that my research can enhance the effect of environmental law for the best interest of human life and the nature, and because I discussed about the practical application of this environmental principles, the authorities can adopt those principles to maintain to the existing legal framework for the maintain this environmental improvement. These are the research questions I have drafted which I have answered in my study. The condition of the environment in pre and post COVID-19 lockdown, the significance of environmental law and principles with regard to current changes, and finally, I gave some recommendations for the implementation. And these objectives are based on the questions which I have drafted. This is the methodology which I have used to do my research. This is a library-based live research method used. I have used live research method to do my research. Then I use theoretical analysis for selection and discussion of descriptive data, as well as I use comparative analysis on those materials in order to reach my hypothesis. So I focused on local and foreign articles regarding the environmental changes during this pandemic and environmental legal principles. And I use qualitative approach for evaluating the data to reach my research objectives. So I analyze the current and pre-environmental quality by the relevant articles, and I discuss the importance of those legal principles through judicial decisions. Case laws and statutes I use as the primary data, and I use books, newspapers, and articles as my secondary data. Before going to discussion, I want to stress the fact that the environmental law is designed to strike a balance between the development and the nature. So we should not ignore the nature when we're doing our development, and we should not ignore the development for mere protection of nature. So based on that principles, there are several principles as drafted in environmental law. First principle which I use is the sustainable development, which means that development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs, according to Brundtland report. This principle has been recognized in many environmental law cases in Sri Lanka, and among those I used in my study the case of Bulankamua and others versus Secretary, Ministry of Industrial Development, simply known as the Epawala case, which is held in Supreme Court of Sri Lanka. That what happened in this case was the Sri Lankan government and an American company has entered into an agreement to mine the phosphate in the Epawala area. So in such a scenario, the resident in the Epawala area has objected these agreements because they said that the phosphate is non-renewable resources. So the Supreme Court of Sri Lanka held that since the phosphate is non-renewable resources, the government should use such natural resources in a sustainable manner for the betterment of the future generations also. So when it comes to this pandemic situation, I can say that due to the lockdown measures, there is low vehicle and gas emissions, and the people behavior are restricted, which is caused a good impact on environment. So in Sri Lanka, by following this sustainable development, which is the main objective, is for the betterment of future generations, to protect the nature for the betterment of future generations. Our authorities should maintain this environmental quality. They should have adequate measures to maintain this environmental quality. Since although we have some measures under our National Environmental Act, such as Central Environmental Authority, Environmental Impact Assessment, and Environmental Impact Assessment and Environmental Protection License, but when it compares with 2019 and current environmental records, in my opinion, I can say that these are not sufficient. So our government, our authority has a duty to maintain this environmental quality by following sustainable development principles for a better future generation, for the betterment of future generation. The second principle which I have used is the polluter pays principle. Nowadays, this is a widely discussion area in Sri Lanka because of the pandemic, because of the situation which relate to the ship called Express Pearl, which is caught fire in the Sri Lankan waters. So our government tried to take the damages from the owners of the ship by following this polluter-pays principle. This is the general idea in this principle is the people who are responsible with causing pollution must bear the cost of such pollution. This principle is also recognized in Pulankamur and others, which is simply known as I said before, the FRA case, and an Indian case of Pennsylvania versus Kamalanath. Both of these cases, the courts held that the polluter should bear the cost of its pollution without put them into the general public and the nature. So, by following this principle, I can say that during this pandemic situation, the authorities can identify who are the polluters. They can identify it by comparing the previous and the current records, who are the main polluters, and the government can impose some restrictions such as the taxes or fines or fine. If they begin the pollution again, they can impose such measures, such laws for them to bear the cost of their pollution. Because I think the absence of such mechanism is the main reason for their pollution level is high. Third principle is the precautionary principle, which means it is better to prevent the environmental degradation at first place rather than allow it to occur and repair the damage after that. This principle has recognized as in the previous Empower case and an Indian case, Well-Ordered Citizens Welfare Forum versus Union of India. Both these cases, the court held the state should not ignore these precautionary measures by the mere reason of lack of scientific knowledge. So, our government has a duty to identify the pollutions, who are the pollutants and their pollution level, and impose a duty to those polluters to take measures to prevent the adverse effect rather than allow it to occur. In the Indian case of Well-Ordered Citizens, the court has specified that there should be three factors, namely the state should anticipate, prevent and attack the causes of environmental degradation, and the state should not force-pay the cost-effective measures, as I said before, the lack of scientific knowledge. And there is a grave and irreparable damage that the onus is in the polluter to prove the actions and to prove the actions and repair the damage. The fourth principle which I use is the public trust doctrine. This is actually a duty imposed to the government to protect the nature. This is recognized in our constitution by Article 27:14, which states that the state shall protect, preserve, and improve the nature for the benefit of the community. So this principle means that the government should be the trustee of the natural resources of the state, and it should use and protect those resources for the benefit of the people and in the country, benefit of the people in the country. This has been recognized in the Sri Lankan case of Sugata Parliamendis and another versus Chandrika Kumarthunga and others. That is simply means the water sage case. The facts in this case were the then government of Sri Lanka has acquired a property by saying that it is for the public benefit, public purpose. But actually, they have acquired the property not for a public purpose, but they have given this property to a private entrepreneur to make a private golf course. So this petitioners has objected this action of the government, and the court held that the power is given to the government by the people by the constitution, that is Article 3 and 4 of our constitution, that means the sovereignty. And the government, not only the government, the state should, the government, that means the executive and the legislature should use such power for the benefit of people. They cannot exceed their power. So I think when it comes to this pandemic situation, the state has a duty, the authorities has duty to maintain this improved environmental quality. So they must take the measures to maintain. They must take measures to maintain this environmental quality. The final principle which I use is the public interest litigation. This is the foremost locus standi, which means that a concerned person or organization file an action on behalf of another poor or otherwise underprivileged people, and also the citizens standing to bring an action before the court with regard to a matter in public interest as concerns the citizen of the society. So I think we all have a duty in this pandemic situation. We all have a duty to force the government to maintain this environmental quality. As responsible citizens in the country, we all have a duty to force the authorities to maintain this environmental quality.
I'm so sorry, Hansi. I'm so sorry, Hansi. Time is running out. You have to conclude your paper within 5 minutes.
Yeah, sure. This right has been recognized in Article 12 of the Constitution of our Sri Lanka based on the equality before the laws. So by the law, we have given power to protect our fundamental rights, and this is include the protection of the environment also, because we all have a right to clear air, to clear water. So by following this principle, we can force the government to maintain this environmental quality which we witness in our in this pandemic situation, this good environmental quality. So I have included some brief discussion about the pollution in India, because it has a transformative effect, as I said before, because India has a right India has a India has a duty to not to cause damages, not only for their domestic environment, but also they must concern about transformative effect the overseas environment also, as said in trade smelter arbitration. These are the recommendations given by me for the implementation of for maintain this better environmental quality based on my discussion part. The main reason, the main principle which I use to draft this recommendation is the environmental justice. This means that the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people without any discrimination based on race, nationality, religion, or otherwise. So we all have a duty to protect our environment. So I think the judges can interpret the law more broadly. Then it may assume that the general public may have more opportunities to bring their cases, and at the same time, the relevant authorities may act in more responsible way. And I think it is better to include a direct provision in our constitution regarding public trust doctrine, as in Hawaiian Constitution in the USA, which declares that all public resources should be held in trust by the state for the benefit of people. And I think establishing a mechanism to monitor the Central Environmental Authority and environmental impact assessment and environmental protection license processes, because as the society in our country, and because we are a developing country, and so because of the nature of our society, the wealthy factory owners can drive those officials in those places. So we have we have to have a special mechanism to monitor the works of those for those organizations. And when the public awareness is raised, I think the many people can concern about their rights regarding the environment, and it will benefit not only the nature, not only the current society, but also the future generations. So, in my conclusion, I think I can remind the people about by this research, by my study, I can remind the people about the importance of the environmental policies and their application, and I think this will be a good opportunity for the relevant authorities to identify the major pollutants in the country and take measures to minimize their pollution level and enhance the current mechanisms if they are not sufficient. And these are the references which I used to do my study. And thank you for listening my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Hansi. Can you please turn on your video now? Actually,
you cannot start your video because of the host has stopped, but there is a pop-up message for me. The host only can start my video, I think.
Is it? No. You can. You can, because you have a option to turn on your video, because in a presentation, physical appearance is equally important. So thank you. You can turn on your video from your part. Okay, now I'd like to call Mahmudul Hassan Shobuz. He is from University of Asia Pacific, and his topic is COVID-19 vaccine. No business on lives. Shobuz.
Assalamu alaikum, ma'am. Am I audible? Hello, ma'am. Hello.
Yes, we can hear you, Hassan.
We can hear you, Shobuz.
My laptop has suddenly stopped working, and that's why I'm unable to present my slides. I'm facing problems to present my slides.
Okay, what's the problem? Is it soluble or?
It's not working.
So
actually, my laptop has stopped, and.
But okay, you can continue your presentation.
A very good morning and assalamu alaikum.
You can send your
distinguished panelists.
Do you have your presentation with you? You can send the presentation to me, so that I can share on behalf of you.
It is on my laptop, and I didn't send anybody, and then I didn't keep it in my email or.
Okay, no problem. Continue. No problem. Continue.
Thank you, ma'am. A very good morning and assalamu alaikum to distinguished panelists, guests, and others who are present here. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to present my thoughts in such a platform. Next 20 minutes, I'll be talking about intellectual property rights waiver on COVID-19 vaccine and how the rich countries and big pharmas are behaving. This agreement provides some flexibility relating to intellectual products like compulsory licensing, patent extension, and government use for non-commercial purposes. Compulsory license is an authorization given by a national authority to a private party or public agency
Nazia madam?
I think I can call the next presenter, is it? Okay, Shobuz, can you hear me? Shobuz, can you hear me? Okay, at this stage, I want to call our last presenter, Zarin Tasnim Rahman. She is from University of Dhaka. Her paper is, the title of her paper is Human Rights and the Policy Perplex COVID-19 in Context. So, Zarin, please start your presentation. Zarin, you can start your presentation. Okay, I am contacting Shobuz, so no worries. Zarin, we cannot hear you. Zarin?
Assalamu alaikum. I hope I am audible.
Yes, you are.
Assalamu alaikum, honorable guests and judges, and thanks to the keen audience for your kind presence. The topic of my paper presentation is human rights and COVID-19. With due respect to all, I am going to discuss my paper under the title Human Rights and Policy Perplex COVID-19 in Context. I will be discussing how human rights are being violated during the COVID-19 situation in Bangladesh and some possible reforms to address the problem. So here are my contents. I will be gradually discussing those one by one. To begin with, the background of human rights and COVID-19 needs to be discussed. At first, World Health Organization has declared COVID-19 as a public health emergency of great concern. Human civilization is living through a devastating pandemic from the end of 2019. Till now, scientists have not been able to find an effective remedy to draw an end line to this pandemic. Countries all around the world are trying to control the situation by imposing lockdowns and different kinds of restrictions. Bangladesh is also following the same methods, though not efficiently. Based on this scenario, the article examines the impact of lockdown on the general people of Bangladesh and tries to find out whether the system ensures meaningful restrictions or not. And if not, what are the factors which are responsible for that failure. Coming to the next point, which is the issues of the article, the focus of the analysis of my paper pivots around three central human rights issues, which are right to work, right to movement, and in the last, right to health, including right to life. At the end, a few suggested prospects of reform will be discussed to at least minimize the sufferings of the general people, which arose due to the declared lockdown. So coming to the next slide, which is on the method of the study. In this paper, analytical approach was used for the study, and relevant secondary data was collected from editorials of various national dailies, as well as notifications of different ministries of the government of the People's Republic of Bangladesh from time to time. Through keen observation over the situation and the measures taken by the government during the situation, the study concludes with recommendations on required legal and policy changes. Different articles, reports, news analysis, etc. added to the contribution of the study. The restrictions imposed by the government during COVID-19 situation will be discussed now. At first, scenario of COVID-19 and lockdown in Bangladesh needs to be discussed for better understanding of my paper. So I'm going to describe all these. The restrictions imposed by the government since 26 March 2020, which is continuing till present, can be summarized as follows. First of all, I will be discussing about transportation. During lockdown, transportation nearly remained closed except emergency medical services, basic needs, etc. And the limited access to public transportation was available in 11 city corporation areas. But as we can see from different dailies and newspapers, that local authority has showed their failure in implementing effective lockdown as well as hygienic maintenances. I want to mention another thing, which is during lockdown, governmental, semi-governmental, and almost all autonomous offices were allowed to run with some limitations. Though authority made rules to provide required transportation with hygienic measures for the employees, the reality shows the different view. The reality shows that employees had to arrange transport on their own effort, bearing sufferings, and most importantly, up to 60% increased fare, which directly violates their right to movement. In the next point, I will be discussing distribution of relief goods. The government had to distribute the relief goods to the poor people, but the poor people couldn't get enough relief goods to lead their life. Again, the government allowed all industries and construction works to continue their works with some conditions, but in reality, none of those authorities maintained any proper hygiene during their functions. In addition, the government had directed Bangladesh Garment Manufacturers and Exporters Association, or BGMEA, or as well as BKMEA, which is Bangladesh Knitwear Manufacturers and Exporters Association, to start field hospitals for the employees of the factories, although no mentionable initiatives were taken in this regard. According to different surveys of our country, about 70% of the country's foreign currency comes from these industries, but the employees of these industries were overlooked. It's unfortunate. Even markets and shopping malls were kept open after a few periodic lockdown, and ignorance about the situation was noticed here also. I want to discuss something about distribution of relief goods again. The needy people who live from hand to mouth. Especially, I want to mention here the rickshaw pullers. They lost their way of earning but didn't get enough relief because of corruption and lack of superintendence. That was all about lockdown scenario under COVID-19 in Bangladesh. Now, moving forward to the violation of the 3 human rights, which are the focus of my analysis. Before discussing the violation of human rights, I want to clarify one thing, which is Article 141C of the Constitution of the People's Republic of Bangladesh declares suspension of enforcement of human rights as valid. But what I want to clarify in this context is that the poor people should not be deprived of working without a proper scheme of helping them. And the authority should ensure minimal sufferings to the general people as much as it can be. Both these contexts are not contradictory. They help each other to find their loopholes and to reform them. So let's begin with the right to work. The right to work, according to the Constitution of the People's Republic of Bangladesh, Article 40 ensures right to enter upon any lawful profession or conduct trade. Again, Article 20 ensures work as a right. But as we can see, it has been noticed that steps taken by the government have been discriminatory among the people of the country. During these lockdowns, although the government employees received their salary, the poor people who live from hand to mouth were deprived of working without getting proper relief. They barely have any savings to fulfill their daily necessities of life without working a day. Hence, the continuous lockdown caused sufferings to them the most. This kind of problem arose because of lack of proper planning and coordination among the ministries of the government. Before declaring lockdown, the government needs to adopt a proper scheme to help the poor of the country. Among the news from different national dailies, a few cases can be discussed in this context. As we can see, Fazlur Rahman, a poor rickshaw puller who had bought a rickshaw taking a loan of about 80,000 taka, he had no other way left during the lockdown than to go out with the rickshaw to feed himself and his poor family. Unfortunately, Dhaka South City Corporation, or we can say it DSCC authority, broke his only way of earning. He was completely shattered as he had no other way to live, and he had no food at his house, and at the top of that, he had to repay the loan of Taka 80,000, which was nearly impossible for him. We can discuss another situation found from Daily Star. Alamgir Hussain, another poor rickshaw puller, had to come out to arrange money for his ailing child, but his rickshaw was confiscated by the police, and he was completely shattered. These two newses got reported in most of the national dailies of the country, including the Daily Star. Coming to the next slide, which will be discussing right to movement. According to Article 36 of the Constitution of the People's Republic of Bangladesh, every citizen shall have the right to move freely throughout the country, subject to reasonable restrictions imposed by law in the interest of the public, as we can see in the next slide. But during the lockdowns, people were being restricted to move to another city, even in cases of necessity also. Moreover, discrimination arose when private vehicles were allowed to continue, but public transports were restricted, which is in violation of the provisions of the Constitution itself, which can be found in Article 27 and Article 28(1) of the Constitution of the People's Republic of Bangladesh. Again, when public transport was reopened in the 11 city corporation area, the fare was unproportionately increased up to 60%, which was beyond the capacity of the poor people. So next, discussing the right to health and how it is violated during the COVID-19 situation in Bangladesh. It is on right to health. Though COVID-19 pandemic is a health emergency, the government has shown its failure to face challenges in health sector, especially for the marginalized people whom I want to mention. Proper healthcare was not available around the country. Again, restriction on vehicles has created a chaos in accessing health service. Though proper transportation and enough transportation needed to be available for the medical sector, most of the poor people couldn't go to city for better treatment. This is linked with right to movement. We can describe another situation or another news, which is as follows. On Sunday, April 18, 2021, under the heading of Father Pedals Rickshaw for 110 kilometers to take baby to hospital, the sufferings of a poor family to save the child was published in the Daily Star. The father took his ailing daughter to Rangpur Medical College from Thakurgaon by his rickshaw, which he had to pull himself, as he had not enough money to call an ambulance, and as well as public transportation was also closed. This created many problems for them. These were all about the problems, or in other words, the violations of human rights and an overview of the sufferings of the general people. Now we can move towards some recommendations which can at least minimize the sufferings of the people to a certain extent, which arose due to lack of proper scheme and supervision by the government. So coming to the next slide, these are some suggested prospects of reform, which I'll be discussing gradually. The first is proper planning and management. Before declaring or imposing lockdown, a proper plan should be taken, and the ministries of the government should work together to make the lockdown effective. And most importantly, which I want to mention, distribution of relief goods should be organized and out of corruption. Secondly, proper coordination. Proper coordination among the ministries of the government should be maintained to avoid any kind of confusion among the public. Next is supervision over the measures taken. We all know that any kind of step taken by the government or any authority can go in vain because of lack of monitoring and supervision. Lockdown has faced such failures in our country as proper monitoring was not emphasized. This is the most important thing which need to be monitored. These difficulties should be met immediately so that we can control the situation effectively. The next I have written is the decentralization to make immediate measures. It's a suggestion. The government can divide the areas into different segments so that the government can monitor the effectiveness of the restriction easily. This kind of segments can also help in taking immediate measures in case of any kind of emergency, which is now common in our country because of COVID-19. Next, the government should ensure that the measures already taken or will be taken in future are accurate, consistent, and less painstaking for the general people. The government should restrict the rights as much as international standards permit in this situation. To sum up, I will discuss some topics. International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which we call ICCPR. It requires that restrictions on rights for reasons of public health or national emergency should be lawful, necessary, and proportionate. Restrictions should be carried out during this situation, obviously, but only in accordance with the law and human rights. We have to ensure that. The measures should be proportionate. They should not neither arbitrary nor discriminatory.
I'm sorry, Zarin Tasnim, you have to conclude your paper within 5 minutes, please.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am. The measures should be proportionate, neither arbitrary nor discriminatory in application, and those should be respectful of human dignity and subject to peer review. And as government has banned travel and restrictions on freedom of movement, travel bans and restrictions on freedom of movement should not be discriminatory. And most importantly, right to health must be available to the marginalized people all around the country. Government should move towards mandatory restrictions when measures to support them can be ensured. I want to repeat it. Government should move towards mandatory restrictions when mechanisms to support them can be ensured. And government should avoid broad restrictions on movement and personal liberty. When lockdowns are imposed, we have to ensure that access to water, access to food, and access to healthcare are ensured. The strategies should minimize disruption in services and at the same time develop the sources of comparative services. Next slide is key findings of the article. As we have already discussed in the paper, the article finds that reasons and effect of failure to impose effective lockdown and as well as the issues could be avoided or at least be minimized by taking proper steps, and the prospects of reform has already been discussed. Next, in conclusion from the above scenario, as we can understand that human rights are being violated far under the shadow of lockdown. Some measures are proving to be irrelevant and ineffective. Sometimes the measures are creating inequality, discrimination, and creating greater harm to public life. Therefore, proper steps on required legal and policy changes would enhance the long-term preparedness of the government and will help to control the situation with minimal or at least no harm to human rights. That's all about today's paper. You are wholeheartedly welcomed to come up with any related recommendation to improve my paper. I will be obliged. Again, thanks to the distinguished guests and panelists. Special thanks to the audience for their keen interest in my paper. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you so much, Zarin, for your contemporary, for presenting the contemporary issues. So, Shobuz, are you ready? Shobuz?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes.
Actually, it's raining since the morning. So, due
Yes.
to the bad weather, our network is interrupting. So, we are so sorry for the unavoidable circumstances. Now, again, I am calling Mahmudul Hassan Shobuz. He is from University of Asia Pacific, and his topic is COVID-19 vaccine, no business on lives.
I sincerely apologize for the inconvenience and hope that all of you will understand my situation, that the instability of internet connection. And ma'am, shall I start from the beginning or shall I start from where I lost my connection?
From the beginning.
A very good morning and assalamu alaikum to the distinguished panelists, guests, and others who are present here. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to present my thoughts in such a platform. Next 20 minutes, I'll be talking about intellectual property rights waiver on COVID-19 vaccine and how the rich countries and the big pharmas are behaving towards the low-income countries. TRIPS agreement provides some flexibilities relating to intellectual property rights on pharmaceuticals products like compulsory licensing, patent extension, and government use of non-commercial purposes. Compulsory license is an authorization given by a national authority to private party or public agency to use the patented invention without the consent of the patent holder. Article 73 of the TRIPS agreement also forces the patent holder parties to issue compulsory license for pharmaceutical products on ground of national security exceptions. The Doha Declaration recognizes the right of the WTO members to adopt measures necessary for their public health. All flexibilities of TRIPS, a member has the right to grant compulsory licenses by justifying the grounds of such licenses and determine what constitutes its national emergency or circumstances of extreme urgency in granting compulsory license. Public health crises all over the world like HIV/AIDS, malaria, and other epidemic constitute national emergency or circumstances of extreme urgency. It allows compulsory licenses to override pharmaceutical patent right to protect public health.
Please continue.
The Doha Declaration should understand, explain, and apply to all known and unknown diseases. TRIPS waiver must widely include relevant drugs, vaccines, technical processes, and equipment essential to address the public health crisis caused not only by known disease, but also by unknown potential diseases, such as bird flu, Ebola, and COVID-19, which were unknown at the time of Doha Declaration. I have said this before and will say it again, that vaccines are the only way out of this crisis. But vaccine making has become exclusive, almost like a cartel. And we all know how cartels work. They are ruthless and unwavering, just like the big farmers. They are still clinging on patents. They are still putting profits above human lives. So it's time for government to step in and dictate big farmers. India and South Africa are doing this. They took the lead in October last year, pushed for a patent waiver at the WTO. As expected, the West pushed back. Their success depends on Joe Biden, who is the president of the United States of America. If the United States changes its position, then the West will definitely follow it. So what exactly Joe Biden said about the patent waiver? The answer depends on which Joe Biden we are talking about, the candidate Joe Biden or the President Joe Biden. Candidate Joe Biden promised to waive patent laws. He said absolutely, positively, this is the only human thing in the world to do. But as president, he has blocked patents so far. More than 100 United States Congress members have asked President Biden to waive the patents. So here, what is stopping him? That is the question. And the answer is the cartel, as I told about the big farmers. The United States Trade Office is apparently holding talks with some stakeholders. And here, who are the stakeholders? They are Moderna, Pfizer, AstraZeneca, and BioNTech. And of all people, Bill Gates, the man who openly rubbished patent waiver. Also pushing back is United States Chamber of Commerce. They have called the idea for patent waiver a mistakenly belief. These are the people that Joe Biden consulting on whether patent should be waived or not. And of course, it's possible that he decides to support the waiver anyway, but the damage has already been done. Vaccine protection has been backed by months. So even if patents are waived now, they should be waived better late than never. The first reverse engineering, meaning to break down the formula and you create the vaccine from scratch. Then you conduct clinical trials on those vaccines. A patent waiver is not sharing the formula. It basically means you are allowed to copy the formula only. And all this is going to take time. All this. So Joe Biden delay may have doomed the developing world already, as we are suffering. But let's not lose sight from the real villain here, which are the big pharmas. They have always defended patents, and pandemic or not, their arguments never change, never. They make two broad arguments from their side. The first one is patent boost innovation, and the second one is voluntary sharing is a better option. Now, I'd like to talk about the first one, that does patent really boost innovation? Is that their only incentives? Not quite. During this pandemic, Big Pharma had a big caution and insurance of sorts. We're talking about the public funding. Let's look at how each country spent rapid, and we all know how much money they gave to the big pharma, and approximately it's $18 billion. And in the United Kingdom, they got 116 million, and most of it went to Oxford and AstraZeneca. And the overall 112 billion.
Shoboj, you there? Shoboj. Shoboj, unmute. yourself. Shobuj. Farjana ma'am, are you there?
Ma'am, am I audible now?
Mahmudul Islam Shobuj, I cannot hear you. Please turn off on your
Yes, ma'am.
Exactly. Thank you. Carry on.
Carry on, please. Shobuj, please.
And yes, ma'am. Sorry for the inconvenience. So people funded the vaccine, but when the vaccines are ready, big pharmas locked away the formula. Now, what about the profits? Pfizer revealed their revenue projection that they are expecting 26 billion from vaccine has never turned a profit in history. But this year, they could ramp up to 20 billion in vaccine sales. AstraZeneca has already reached $275 million in a single quarter of this year. Here are things for sure that there is no loss from the pharma companies. That combined with public funding, high chances are every vaccine maker is making a very good amount of money. Here, billions of dollars are in grants and billions of dollars from sales and pre-orders. So what more big pharma companies want? They basically raiding treasuries in the middle of a pandemic. Vaccine makers do not need, they have enough incentives from government funding and from sales. The other big problem is hoarding or stocking of vaccines. More than 1 billion doses have been administered globally, and of them, 82% of these were in the developed countries and only 0.3% in the low-income countries. This is vaccine apartheid. At this rate, the virus will be mutating in Africa and in Asia, and this pandemic will drag on for years. If we just look at the United States instances or their incentives, it has been secured nearly 1 billion doses for 300 million people. Unless the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, that is CDC, has advised 3 doses for every person, this is hoarding. This is hoarding or stocking of vaccines. And let me end by saying this, that the COVID-19 pandemic has bunched off the mob bosses, that it has revealed ultranationalism in the West, and also it has shown us a nexus between big pharmas and government.
Shobuj, I am so sorry to interrupt you. You have to conclude your paper within 5 minutes. Time is running out. Thank you.
The Director General of the World Trade Organization had suggested us to use existing TRIPS flexibilities, particularly compulsory licensing, by which WTO members will drag manufacturing capacity to spend up mass production of the COVID-19 vaccines. These flexibilities should afford WTO members enough scope to override any pharmaceutical patent compliance requirements for fair and even distribution of COVID-19 pharmaceuticals to save lives, and economics by combating the pandemic across the world. In this pandemic, COVID-19 vaccine must be seen as a global public good to override private intellectual property rights for a collective benefit of humankind. That's all from my part. Thank you for listening. And
thank you so much, Shobut. Thank you to all the participants who have presented their paper. Now, at this stage, I would like to call our honorable panelists for their valuable comments. At first, I would like to call Ms. Saida Rizwana Hassan, Advocate Supreme Court of Bangladesh and Chief Executive of BELA. Ma'am, সবুজ তোমাকে ইয়ে নিতে হবে, তুমি কি স্ক্রিন শেয়ার করে রেখেছো?
No, ma'am.
Okay, please, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Let me first thank University of Asia Pacific for creating this platform for the young minds to critically analyze what they're seeing about the pandemic. It's not something very easy. Witnessing, experiencing a pandemic is actually a very big thing, and I think it's important that the youngsters who are witnessing this are given the opportunity to really think about this crisis, the causes behind it, the impacts of it in the society, and try to find out a place for themselves where they can actually look for their role, the potential role that they can play in future to deal with the impacts of the pandemic and as well as the root causes of the pandemic. And I congratulate all the speakers who have presented the paper. And actually, although I am in the field of environment for the last 27 years, I've learned some things from all your presentation. So thanks to both UAP and all the presenters today. I think the lessons that we should take from this pandemic is that we should not try to win over nature. Nature is something we'll never be able to defeat. It is much more mighty, much more forceful. So we should instead learn to live with nature. The second lesson that I would think we should all learn is how do we really define development? What's happening around us? All these constructions, all these flyovers, are they really development? I think we should ask ourselves this question, because the first thing we need for us to live is water, is air. The second thing that we need for us to live is water. The third thing that we need for our living is food. And all the three things, air, water, and food, actually is coming from nature. So anything that we do in the name of development, we must ensure that we don't really poison our air, we don't poison our water, and we don't disrupt our safe food production system. So yes, there will be development, but we probably will need to slow down the pace a little. And it's not the corporate model of development that we should be following. We should always keep nature at the center of development and rearrange the development agenda accordingly. It should not be the other way around. The third lesson for me has been that we should not be destroying, damaging, destructing things that we cannot create. We can set up 100 industries, but if the industries pollute a river, like they have done to our Buriganga, like they are doing to our Dholeshwari, will not be able to recreate a river, will not be able to restore a hill system, will not be able to recreate a Sundarbans. Yes, we need energy, but there are alternatives to it. The good thing about today's environmental activists, advocates, and the environmental agenda is that we actually do have development models in the world that are sustainable. We all want to go to US, have 3 cars and 5 apartments. But if you look at the youth in Bhutan, they don't speak that language. Bhutan has decided to keep 60% of its landscape as forest at all given point of time. And the Bhutanese young stars are not getting into drugs because the government is strictly controlling it. And the Bhutanese youngsters have actually looked more for peace than for an unrest, rushed lifestyle that we often confuse with development. People talk about sustainability. We talk about laws, lawyers, judges, processes. And we wonder what is a sustainable way of living. I would urge everyone to look at the lifestyles of the wealthy farmers of Bangladesh. I won't urge them to look at the lifestyle of farmers who are poor, living below the poverty line, not having enough nutrition. But if you look at some village leaders, I mean, today's village leaders are perhaps very different. Let me say the village farmers who are above the poverty line, they have a sustainable living. They have a place to live in. They have a TV in their house. They have a light to give them the comfort. They have a fan to give them the comfort. But it's not. I mean, they're not asking for things in excess. So the sustainable model of living is there. The sustainable development agenda has actually been set forth by countries like Rwanda, countries like Costa Rica, country like Bhutan. So I would urge our young leaders who have spoken today to actually look at those sustainable lifestyles and find out where actually we are going wrong. Having said all this, let me just talk about a few more things that I've heard from you all. I think the curriculum in our universities, in our schools, in our colleges should change. And from the very beginning, we should actually tell our youngsters about what a sustainable living requires them to do. True that we do have inadequacies in the legal regime, but then we have a very good constitution in the country. Have we been able to act as per the constitution? My answer is no. So we do have promises about health rights. We do have promises about environmental rights, but these promises are not commitments. So in order to ensure that these promises actually convert into definite commitment, you youngsters have a definite role to play. It is you who will be bearing the brunt of climatic change. Will be gone by then. So when you will be in the leadership position, maybe 1/3 of Bangladesh will go underwater. You're seeing what Greta Thunberg is doing in Sweden and the impact her activism has among the other young minds. They're boycotting schools on every Friday and they're calling it Fridays for Fortune. So leadership does not have to come from the person sitting next to you. It can actually come from yourself, provided our education system is value-based and it does not set a canvas seeing which all the youngsters want to go to US and want to go to Singapore and don't think about Costa Rica, or don't think about Rwanda, or don't think about Bhutan. You've talked about inequity in the health sector. You've also talked about injustice in the environmental sector. I think in both the sectors, despite having laws, the laws are not really meeting our expectations. Our institutions are not really meeting our expectations. It's all about business. It's a corporate world we are living in, and the agenda for us to ensure that we don't live in a corporate world. We live in a nature-based world. Otherwise, for us to deal with the climatic challenges will be really, 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 really difficult, because climatic challenges will require us to grow more food with a little land available. But the way we are contaminating our soil with the soil that's available now, that will be an extra difficult task for us. So we have to ask for a transformative change, both in the environmental governance and in the health governance sector. We may get very good judgments from the courts, but getting a judgment and getting getting justice are actually two different things, and we have to really bear that in mind. So my concluding comments will be that we have to ask for a transformative change in the development pattern that's happening. We have to ensure that our development is responsible, and we have to really switch towards sustainable development for which models already exist in today's society. Thank you all for your valuable contribution. And I have actually enriched my knowledge base listening to all of you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your valuable comments. Now, at this stage, I would like to call our favorite sir, Professor Dr. Mizanur Rahman, Director Center of the Advanced Legal Studies, University of Dhaka, and former Chairman, National Human Rights Commission of Bangladesh. Sir.
Right, now it appears there's a very good afternoon to all of you. And it's a great privilege to have the floor on this platform provided by University of Asia Pacific with its young minds. And the panelists, my co-panelist, Sayyidah Rizwana Hassan, well, she is, I believe, the acclaimed environmental activist and an authority on environmental law in the country. Whatever she has spoken just now, I just concurred with all her words, all her statements. But since I am a teacher, so I'd be probably pursuing a different path and probably talk a bit on each of the presentations which have been made in this particular session. But at the very outset, like Rizwana did, let me congratulate Nadia Islam Nodi, Mehnaz Binte Amin, Hansi Halan Goda, Mahmoudul Hassan Shobuj, and Zareen Tasneem Rahman for wonderful presentations. Thank you very much. You enriched us all. But as you see, that you are all students, you are learning, we are teachers, we continue to be learning also from you and from elsewhere. So it's only that I am older than you, and therefore I have seen life probably more than you have had the opportunity to see life. So there may be some areas where experientially I have learned more than you have had the opportunity to learn. So from that perspective, I'll be just sharing some of my thoughts on your presentations. But the ground rule, let me just tell you, since we're talking about something about climate change and the COVID and environmental issues, and let me concur with Rizwana again and say, and let me refer to the great philosopher Karl Marx. Karl Marx said that man can control the nature only by complying with the laws of nature. That's the ground rule. So if you violate the rules, the laws of nature, then you have to pay a very serious and high price for your non-compliance. And that probably the present day world is paying the costs of non-compliance with the laws of nature at every turn and twist of civilizational history. However, let me begin with very specific comments. Let me begin with the first presentation by Nadia and Mehnaz. Well, as I said that, well, congratulations. That's a great initiative. But Nadia and Mehnaz, you talked about COVID-19 and the climate change. To be very frank, Nadia, I did not see the connection that you wanted to, that was supposed to be established, that how COVID-19, this pandemic, is impacting the climate change. That was missing from your presentation. But I was looking for that nexus to be presented before us so that we could see that how you are analyzing and interpreting the relationship between these two factors. You in your presentation, you mentioned about new legal hegemony. But what does this mean, new legal hegemony? You didn't give any definition or interpretation of this, your innovative idea, new legal hegemony. How this hegemony is being sort of practiced, and how do we see this hegemony, from which part and from which sources this hegemony is coming from. So we are totally in the dark. But I think the notion itself is very intriguing, very interesting. But I was looking that at some point of time, probably you'll be touching upon your ideas on legal hegemony, but that didn't come. And you're right. The conspiracy theories must not be, given, a place of dignity in your research analysis. All the more because there is no tangible evidence yet that proves that China is to be held responsible for COVID-19 or for coronavirus. So there you're right. But when you say that presumptions and assumptions can always be made, I have a problem. Well, Nadia and Henaz, you are not Humayun Ahmed. You are not writing a piece of fiction. You are producing a research paper. So your assumptions or your presumptions must be based not on hollow space, not in the vacuum, but it must be based on some, facts and figures that is there, probably may not be directly, but remotely connected to your thesis, but not in a vacuum that you are making these assumptions and presumptions. And you see, the damage to the climate led to the COVID-19 virus. Well, is there any proof of that? But when you approach from that perspective, then I'm afraid that you are making a conclusion which is merely, again, a statement without sufficient logic, sufficient reason, sufficient evidence. And as a student of law, well, we cannot accept it when there is no, sort of evidence. Evidence is the, that's why you're taught at the law school, everything is based on evidence. No evidence, no fact, nothing. So there probably I would expect that you be more careful. However, the presentation was interesting. And once again, my words of praise to both of you for your brilliant presentation. The next one was a presentation by Hansi Palangoda from Sri Lanka Law College, the impact of COVID-19 on the environment, a critical analysis with environmental law principles and environmental justice. A huge area you have taken, Hansi. Thank you. You have taken a huge area to cover within a very short presentation. But what is, for me, what I expect that in your title, you mentioned critical analysis, but I would have loved if there would have been more critical analysis of the statements you're making. For example, let me just give you a concrete example. You talk about the positive impact of COVID on environment, the air quality improvement, 52.1%, compared to 2018, 2019, 22, the US State Department, the statistics that you provide. Yes, very convincing that how, the air quality has improved. And it was in the whole of South Asia, even in Dhaka, the fourth, I think, most unlivable, uninhabitable city in the world today, even Dhaka had a very, significant enhancement of air quality in the initial days of the so-called lockdown or the public holidays that we have had. But you see, if we are just praising this, then we have to be very cautious. The lockdown led to this improvement in work quality. Then do we believe in lockdown? Do we believe that we should just close ourselves within the four walls and not do the usual everyday work that we're supposed to do? How does the life go on then? And you see, you cannot, and probably we are not suggesting that we go back to the days of primitive society. Well, then the environment would have been in an ideal form. But are we, thinking of going back to the primitive days? No. As just, Rizona mentioned that we are all for development, but development has to be sustainable, and sustainable also in terms of environmental, sort of quality that we create. So these are the things that probably we need to mention and we need to keep in our mind. You see, you talked about closure of factories and, how it impacted and improved the air and water quality. Yes, fine. But then, are we thinking about the livelihood of the workers? Those who are not working and earning? Those who are without an income? How do they go on and continue their lives? So you see, this, each and everything has an as opposite story that we need to explore and analyze. And let us not forget these faces. Yes, the street vendors, the workers in the factories, the rickshaw pullers, the van pullers, the drivers of the public bus, etc., etc. When it's a total lockdown and you're out of work, and if you are under private ownership, then I'm afraid that you are out of income. How do you sustain yourself? How do you maintain your family? So these are the challenges that as a student of law, you must think. Because we know that our states in the region, they do not think about the common people, about the poor people. So it's you, the new generation, who need to think about how these poor people are going to live their life. How to make a balance. You know, the government in this country had always been talking about, sort of a happy marriage, a marriage of convenience, I would say, between life and livelihood. But how do you do that? So that no single component is neglected and no single component is overemphasized at the cost of other. How do you strike a balance, an ideal balance between the two? So that is something of a challenge that we, as the students of law, can also come up with certain ideas. And Hansi, I would again request you that as a student of law, it's my personal belief, please be more cautious with this notion of public interest litigation. Please, for God's sake, don't be obsessed with the idea of public interest litigation. Gone are those days when public interest litigation was looked at as something like a panacea for the poor people. No, it is not. Despite all the public interest legal interventions, the poor continue to live their life in dignity, in humanity, in poverty. No public interest litigation has ever enhanced the quality of life of the poor. At best, they have been able to secure their pre-existing life. They're not disturbed from their, long living life. But is that what we want? Is that what our goal? No, we want full dignity of a man, of a person living. And that is not happening, and that cannot happen through public interest litigation. So you must have a critical analysis of public interest litigation as such as well. I'm very happy that you mentioned the trail smelter principle, because that has direct relevance with Bangladesh. The corpses, the dead bodies flowing through the Ganges, and Bangladesh being a lower riparian state. Now, had these corpses flown all the way to the territory of Bangladesh, then what is the impact upon Bangladesh? And how do you reconcile with that? How do you challenge that situation? So these are transboundary problems which must be tackled and combated on a transboundary level. So, but you indicated the problem, yes. So there has to be, I would say, an overhauling of the way that these issues are being looked at in this part of the globe. And I think that you have done a commendable job in bringing out these issues to our notice. But Hansi, you talk about enhancing the judge's role. When you talk about people must be made aware. The judges must be more active. The judges must be more pro-people. But how do you do that? The challenge lies there, not merely in saying that enhance the quality of the judges, enhance the role of the judges. That's fine to say, easy to say. But how do you bring about that change in these judges? That is where I would expect you to concentrate more. How do you do that? How do you bring about that particular change in the way that the judges are doing their job in our part of the globe today? Nonetheless, Hansi, wonderful presentation, and thank you very much for a very clear idea on the topic that you gave us. Next is Mr. Mahmoudul Hassan Shobut. Well, Mahmoud, I would say that, it's a very provoking and provocative title that you have. No business on life. It almost sounds like a political rhetoric, and when you are making a presentation, at times you're making statements which I think goes normally with any political leader, and I'm sure that our Minister for Health, who is a good for nothing fella, would be very happy to listen to your statements, when you talk about the life of, the right to life and no patent on the COVID-19 vaccine and so on and so forth. I agree fully with the statements that you made, because you see, the vaccine, towards the end, you made the conclusion that vaccines must be qualified as global public good. That's it. This is a global public good in an era of pandemic. There can be no private ownership. There's no question of having a patent over the vaccines. That is only how we can access to the vaccines. Otherwise, our people, the global South, would be left at the mercy of the capital of the North. And that has to change. This is where we need to intervene. But you see, probably it is Pfizer or Johnson & Johnson which has made 26 billion US dollar profit in the first half during this pandemic. What an astronomical figure. When thousands are dying, then you are making a profit of 26 billion US dollars. So it is easily understandable that these transnational corporations, the pharmaceutical transnationals, they are not simply going to give away their right to patent, so easily. It is international economic relations that is very discriminatory. This is the international economic relations, which is again pro-rich and anti-poor, and we are paying the price for that. So I'm afraid that overnight changes is not going to happen. You are absolutely right. The presidential candidate Joe Biden is not President Joe Biden. So there's a huge difference between the two, as you mentioned, and I fully agree with you. So this is what happens, in the reality on the ground, and we need to understand this ground. And we also know, Shabud, that promises are made to be broken. So that is what Biden did. That's what America does all the time. That was, the world, the capitalist system, the mode of production does. Until and unless you do away with this unjust economic system, unjust production system, unjust production relations, things are not going to be the way that you are expecting things to happen and the vaccines to be made a global public good. Well, let me come to the last presentation by Zareen Tasneem Rahman. Well, Zareen, your presentation on human rights and the policy perplex. I think, Zareen, you have spoken my mind. You have spoken my thoughts. And, I was overwhelmed with your presentation and the kind of the truths that you shared with us today. This is the truth of today's Bangladesh. And when you talk about all these, right to work, the freedom of movement and the freedom, the right to life, all these are integrated. You could simply talk about the right to life and bring in all the different dimensions, and your presentation would not have suffered a bit. Because whatever you have stated, the facts and figures and the stories of life that you have narrated here, that carries a, I think, very urgent message that what is the state of affairs in the People's Republic of Bangladesh. And yes, there was restrictions, but you talked about the emergency. Well, no emergency was declared. But without declaring an emergency, the state imposed restrictions on the fundamental rights. Unfortunately, not a single challenge was there in the court of law. Had there been a challenge, we don't know how the court would have intervened and said. But you're right that, these are things which even, apparently we find that they don't go together. How do you, restrict the fundamental rights, the freedom of movement without declaring an emergency? And why don't you declare an emergency? Because of the extra obligation that the government would have vis-a-vis the people at large. So these are the problems, again, it emanates because in my opinion, Bangladesh is a pro-rich and anti-poor country. This is what is Bangladesh all about. And it shouldn't have been so. That was not our dream in 1971. But today, in 2021, unfortunately, Bangladesh has become a pro-rich and anti-poor country. And so the poor are paying the price of liberty with their lives. If this is going to continue for how long? Well, we don't know. But young minds must begin challenging the status quo. You must challenge the status quo in order to change the status quo. This is what, as a teacher, I would ask you, I would request you, I would invite you to be engaged in. You see, the state, in the kind of situation that you just, narrated, so the state must make, provisions. The state must have the systems in place for social security, for unemployment benefit. The state should be the one held responsible to offer, necessary healthcare to the citizens who are infected with COVID and so on and so forth. Why should individuals die because they don't have oxygen? Why should they die because they don't have money? Why should the father, pull a rickshaw 110 kilometers? Unbelievable, inhuman. And every single state, if it, recognizes itself, claims itself to be a civilized state, should be ashamed that one of its citizens has to ride and carry an ailing daughter 110 kilometers, physical throttling to bring her to the hospital where he will be able to afford the minimum governmental expenses in a public hospital. What a travesty of justice that we see in this country today. All these things, I'm so happy, Zareen, that you brought together. And so, Zareen, I would, for the greater audience at large, I would say that those of you who don't know Bangla, I saw that Padma Rijal, my favorite student, is also there in the audience. So I know that Padma would not understand Bangla, but nonetheless, I think that, you see, constitutionally, we call it the People's Republic of Bangladesh. But has the republic truly become a people's one? This is the question I want to ask you and leave you with, that whether our republic is a people's one or not. And again, if we go for the Bangla translation, we say Gano Prajatantri Bangladesh. Shouldn't it be Gano? Shouldn't it be rather, Jano Ganotantrik Bangladesh? I repeat, Jano Ganotantrik Bangladesh, not Gano Prajatantri Bangladesh, but Jano Ganotantrik Bangladesh. Probably that would have carried the values of the liberation war of 1971 more in the name of the republic, if we call it the People's Republic, in the sense that it is a Jano Ganotantrik, Bangladesh. With these few words, once again, thank you very much, Nazia. Thank you very much, Farzana. Thank you very much, the authorities of University of Asia Pacific, for inviting me and sharing the floor with my former student, but who is an acclaimed environmentalist and an institution by herself, with Sayyida Rizwana Hassan, and listen to these wonderful presentations by these young minds from across the border in South Asia. With these few words, once again, thank you very much. Stay safe, stay well.
Thank you so much, sir, for your excellent comments and recommendations. I think today's participants are they are so lucky that they get the ideas from you. They can, after getting your suggestions and recommendation, obviously their paper will be rich and they can improve their paper. So thanks again, sir. So at this stage, our question answering session is open. In this session, the audience are requesting any audience can put question directly to the presenter. And after getting your question, our presenter will like to answer accordingly. Anyone? Anyone? Today we have Jamila madam. Jamila madam, are you there? Ma'am, are you there? Farjana, are you here? Are you there?
Are you hearing me?
Yes, madam.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for giving this chance to ask some questions. I completely agree with our respected panelists, especially my respected teacher, Professor Dr. Mizanur Rahman sir. Most of my comments are very in line with him. Nonetheless, in one aspect, I would like to make a question to the first speaker, that you use the term legal hegemony. We are experiencing COVID-19 for only the last 1.5 years. However, change in the world order and legal hegemony could be a longer process. Don't you think that it is too early to say that COVID-19 is changing the legal hegemony? Perhaps we should wait a bit to say these kinds of conclusive comment.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Nadia, yes, you are.
Lodi, are you hearing?
Yes, ma'am. I'm hearing you. Thank you for the question. I wanted to actually clear this point. Why we term this as the new legal hegemony? Because we actually added some scholar comments and reports that suggest that the global power has been shifting, because as Mijano Romans are also said that we are living in a capitalist world where trade and economy actually decides the power in sort of a way. He commented something similar to this, and yes, due to this reason that there is a shift in the economy and the trade, and then also that COVID-19 has affected us in a way that the poor countries can become more poor, and the powerful ones who had resources like USA, as we see it as a example of development, then in a like corporate world, then this has also suffered because of this pandemic, because they have seen the shift that they don't have enough food, or they might have to export from the countries in the south. So there is actually there has been conclusions, or there has been scholars commenting on that there is going to be a shift in a near future, or maybe already there is one that we do not actually accept or we do not want to see. So it is not like I'm making any conclusive remarks, rather I'm trying to say that there is something that is that may be happening, but are we ready to accept it? And if it happens, what will happen?
I am just interrupting a bit here. Yes,
yes, ma'am.
Yes, I got your point. There is a probability this kinds of thing may happen. Many scholars perhaps have argued like you. Nonetheless, it's my opinion that perhaps it's too early as just taking a view like this. So whether you will take my comment or not, it's up to you. But apart from those scholars, for me, it is too early to say that it is ultimately changing the world order and legal hegemony. And secondly, in your abstract, you mentioned the notion conspiracy theorists. The term conspiracy is really a very high term. Again, it's too early to say. Even WHO still didn't say anything relating to COVID-19, whether it is a manufactured pandemic or something. So again, in both of the notions, I have found you have given a bit, your comment is a bit too early. Other than this, it's okay. And in line with my respected sir, Professor Dr. Mizanur Rahman, yes, Zareen is also my student in the first year. It's really amazing what she has shared with us relating to human rights and policy perplex. COVID-19 in context. You have highlighted Article Right to Life under Article 32 of the Constitution, freedom of movement under Article 36, and right to work as a basic one of the basic necessities under Article 15, though it's not fundamental rights, rather fundamental policies. But my question still here, though it's amazing, I said earlier, but it's a bit a mere query. May I know why have you only, since your title is ultimately dealing with human rights. So human rights is there are several types of civil, political, human rights, economic, social, and cultural human rights. So we have integrated both of these. The first two, that means 32, right to life, freedom of movement, relating to civil and political, and right to work, economic, social, economic, and cultural. Nonetheless, my question is why you have concentrated only on these particular human rights? Why you didn't go beyond that?
Assalamu alaikum, ma'am. Actually, I wanted to discuss right to work, right to movement, and right to health because, according to me, I thought these three rights are being violated in most of the areas of our country. That's why I wanted to discuss these three rights. And as we have already seen, Article 141C of the Constitution declares suspension of enforcement of fundamental rights during emergencies as valid. But as Sir has said, it was not declared as an emergency, and I agree with Sir.
Exactly. In some of the countries, we are not like that line that you can ultimately attach your comment that we have already declared emergency. There was no emergency in our country declared. So, still now, I think, my question, I am not yet convinced that why you have only confined only with these three rights. Don't you think that there are, especially, I'm just giving a clue to you, there are especially at least one right which should be incorporated from Part 2 under fundamental rights of Constitution.
Ma'am, thank you.
Just think a bit. Perhaps it would be better for you if you just include at least that right, then you can say that yes, most of those rights are ultimately most violated during this pandemic.
Sure, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your recommendations.
One of the very important human rights to me is lapsed from your part. That should be at least incorporated. Thank you.
Okay, ma'am. I will definitely try to find out. And thank you so much, sir and ma'am, for your recommendations. I will definitely work on those recommendations and try to improve my work. Thank you, sir and ma'am.
Ma'am, thank you so much. In this moment, I would like to introduce that we also have our Honorable Justice M.I. Sir. Sir, can you please say something about our conference and the paper presented? Sir? Sir.
Yes, I have been requested by Dr. Asad to say a few words by your observation. You know, to me, this international conference on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the legal field is a very time-befitting topic. As you know, the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic is being keenly felt in the legal arena. People's right to access to justice has been restricted for all practical purposes in this pandemic situation. Violations of human rights of the citizens by the state actors and functionaries are hardly remedied judicially at this point of time. Because of the pandemic-induced grinding poverty and inadequate medical support, the right to life of the vast majority people of this region is in jeopardy. Anyway, the judiciary of Bangladesh has been functioning virtually under a newly enacted law on a limited scale. Hopefully, from today, the lower judiciary as well as the higher judiciary of Bangladesh will be functioning on a full scale, as has been reported in the media. Anyway, as the duration of the pandemic is uncertain, so the normal functioning of the judiciary is also uncertain. The fundamental rights of the citizenry as granted by Part 3 of our Constitution can't remain in a state of limbo for any reason whatsoever. In particular, some issues of grave public concern, like lack of adequate medical care for indigent COVID-19 patients and arbitrary loss of jobs of laborers in both public and private sectors, have come to the fore at this juncture. Given this scenario, the fundamental rights of the vulnerable, marginalized and disadvantaged segments of the population must be protected and enforced. I have heard the presentations made by the different presenters. I have also heard the deliberations, very rich deliberations made by Ms. Sayyida Rejona Hassan and Dr. Mizanur Rahman. I'm in full, according to the observation of Mr. Mizanur Rahman, this country at this point of time has become pro-rich and anti-poor. This observation of Dr. Mizanur Rahman cannot be brushed aside at all. I subscribe to this observation. Ms. Sayyida Rejona Hassan has spoken about sustainable development vis-a-vis the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. She's a gutsy fighter for environmental protection. I also applaud her for her role. She is also an acclaimed environmental activist. She has already got many international, national and regional awards as a bold activist of environment. Anyway, as far as I am concerned, I have been enriched by the deliberations made in this session. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, sir, for coming and for your valuable speech. I think our audience will be happy. At this stage, I would like to end this session. In this session, with all the participants and with our honorable panelists, we also have our head of the department, and also have Asaduzzaman sir, our associate professor, and also we had Jamila madam from the University of Dhaka. I would like to thank to all the audience on behalf of our conference organization committee, and for your participation and for listening to us. Thank you so much.
Recording stopped.